I certainly did not plan to have my first video ever of 2025 be recorded smack dab at the start of March. So yeah, 2 months and a little more is how long you've waited for the first video. And yeah, we could practically say the same thing about our subject for today, as we have another archetype analysis on an archetype that took forever to be revealed as part of the Maze of the Masters set, and that is the Serket and Apophis and Anubis archetype. Yeah, they were collectively like a series of cards grouped together with modern semblance of support into a modern archetype. We're talking about a Duel Monsters era archetype used by Rashid from the original Duel Monsters, aka Merrick's right-hand man. And this archetype certainly has its quirks, but you can definitely see that I at least tried to give them some semblance of a playstyle and merge these three relatively unconnected series together. So without further ado, let's start off with this 16 card archetype, and we'll also be doing this chronologically and not via release date. And we'll be starting off with their only level 4 monster, the brand new The Man with the Mark, which is a level 4 Earth spellcaster, which has the effect that if this card is normal or special summoned, you can take one Temple of the Kings or one spell or trap that mentions it from your deck and either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. You can only use this effect of The Man with the Mark once per turn. While you control Temple of the Kings, this card and Apophis monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. Temple of the Kings you control cannot be destroyed by card effects. Stop ringing my bell! Yeah, it's Carnival, it's like a European equivalent of Halloween here. And yeah, if you heard that, I'm sorry, there's nothing I could have done about it. But anyway, about the man, yeah, this is pretty much a 3 of him because this is, for all intents and purposes, your starter. I mean, yeah, it's the only low-level monster in the archetype you can summon without tributing. And I say it's at least one a low-level monster you can summon without tributing because the Apophis thing, some of you might know, but for those of you who don't know that yet, we'll get there. Anyway, yeah, this is a 3-off. And the search interaction is a bit weird for first comers, but yeah, the Temple of the Kings card and the name designation is the concept this entire archetype is based around. So I won't dwell on much about it here, and let it get expanded in the following cards. And for the next card, we go back a couple decades to the originator, one of the originators of this archetype, that being the mystical beast of Serket, a fairy type monster for some reason, which is a level 6 with 2500 attack, and if you do not control Temple of the Kings, you destroy this card immediately. And also this card banishes any monsters that are destroyed by battle with it, and if this card destroys a monster by battle, it gains 500 attack. I mean, yeah, sure, it is better than the anime version, which was a ritual monster for some imbecilic reason. But yeah, it relies on Temple of the Kings, which at the time was a really powerful card, even getting hit on the ban list at some point. But you might as well skip it completely because he got a retrain. Well, 2 retrains to be precise, but if you really want to experiment, there is no harm in running at least one of these because the OG Temple of the Kings has an effect which requires him to be in your deck. So yeah, if you're feeling experimental, I'd say run one if you feel like it, even in this day and age. The retrain I was referring to is Merciless Scorpion of Serket. Same stat as the original, even down to the fact that it's a fairy monster again for some imbecilic reason, even though it more realistically should be an insect or a fiend. But anyway, it cannot be normal summoned or set and must first be special summoned from your hand by banishing a level 10 or higher monster from your hand or deck. While you control Temple of the Kings, You can only special summon Merciless Scorpion of Serket once per turn this way. Once per turn during your main phase, you can add a Temple of the Kings or a spell card that mentions it from your deck to your hand, and at the start of the damage step, if this card battles an opponent's monster, you can destroy that opponent's monster. And if you do, this card gains attack equal to half the destroyed monster's original attack. Now with this form and of course the artwork, this card is a bit closer to its depiction of effects in the anime, even though the level 10 thing is a bit of an out there thing. They do have a level 10 monster, we'll get to it. It's not part of the Serket line, but yeah, it's some sort of special summoning condition. But yeah, that level 10 does like being in the graveyard or banished, so it's not that bad and perfect, and plays perfectly with the new concept of the deck. And anyway, also it searches out back row, well, spells to be more precise, that mention Temple of the Kings, which is pretty neat. And of course, again, you max out on this because it's the new Scorpion of Serket. And yeah, you definitely wanna have the full potential of this guy, especially with that massive attack gaining that he will be doing whenever he destroys a monster by battle. I would have preferred if it also had the effect that it's always treated as the original Serket Scorpion. So that you can use the OG Temple of the Kings effect that I mentioned earlier without resorting to running the original. That kind of sucks, but again, it's not that bad, so yeah, still a great card, just a few hiccups that prevent it from being the greatest of all. Anyway, their last main deck monster is the aforementioned level 10 that they have, Anubis the Last Judge, their first boss monster, I guess you could call it that. It's a level 10 fiend with 3000 attack and 0 defense, and cannot be normal summoned or set, and must first be special summoned from your hand or graveyard. Well, you have 3 or more cards in your graveyard with different names that are Temple of the Kings and or traps by placing the 2 of them on the bottom of the deck in any order. You can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, add 1 the man with the mark from your deck to your hand, and if a spell or trap card you control is destroyed by a card effect, you can target 1 card your opponent controls destroyed. You can only use each of these effects once per turn. Yeah, it's a boss monster in a sense that it's an archetypal. What was the guy called? The zombie guy that summons itself from the graveyard if you have a field spell, Balderosh or something like that. Yeah, it's kind of like that monster. High level and high attack beat stick that recurs itself from the hand or graveyard if you have a specific kind of setup enabled in the archetype. And this one also, again, dumping him is really easy into the graveyard for that revival effect like we discussed with the last card, so that shouldn't be a problem. Traps in being in the graveyard is also something this archetype likes to do. Foolish Burial Goods gain some additional incentive to be ran here in order to set this guy up. It's not the most amazing, like the most like impressive thing about him that he does actively is the pop effect, which again is not the most reliable method to be honest, but given the numerous handicaps that the archetypal back row has decided to attach to itself, it's the best you can get. So yeah, running 2 or 3 of these is usually advised. So now we move on to their 2 extra deck monsters, their 2 fusion monsters to be precise. They're both level 6, and the first one is Divine Serpent of Apophis. It requires 2 monsters that mention Temple of the Kings as material, has 2800 attack and 2600 defense, it's a reptile type, and must be either fusion summoned or special summoned by tributing 2 Apophis monsters, and once per turn you can target up to 3 Apophis traps with different names in your graveyard, set them, and once per turn if a trap card is activated except during the damage step, you can target 1 card your opponent controls, destroy it. For the Apophis line, this is the definitive boss monster and basically the best the Apophis line has to offer in general. And the second effect, I mean the popping effect I should say, synergizes wonderfully with one of the retrains that the archetypal traps have gotten, so it's definitely worth running at least 2 copies of this because this effect is definitely something to be wary about, and it's not even a hard once per turn, it's only a soft once per turn. So if you pair up 2 or 3 of these, and yeah, 3 of these you're rarely gonna see on the field at the same time, but 2 of these at once, you can provide some fairly nasty removal, which is actually pretty insane for an archetype from basically a concept from the Stone Age, essentially a Stone Age of Yu-Gi-Oh! But anyway, next up we have their final monster for today, Divine Scorpion Beast of Serket, another Serket retrain, which requires a Serket monster and a monster with 2500 or less attack. If this card is special summoned or at the start of the damage step, if this card battles an opponent's monster, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls or in their graveyard, banish it, and if you do, this card gains attack equal to half the banished monster's original attack. You can only use this effect of Divine Scorpion Beast Serket once per turn. Can make a second attack during each battle phase while a level 10 or higher monster is banished. So essentially it's a second flavor of the other Serket retrain from the main deck, this one being a bit more immediate, if I could put it like that, as it gains the attack bonus on summon, first of all, making it a more potent beater from the start. Battling twice while a level 10 monster or higher is banished is something really nice, and again, putting Anubis into the graveyard and banishing it is something this deck highly likes doing and can do it really well. So the double attacking can always be live, and again, it's their biggest beat stick that allows them to push for game most of the time, so naturally you should run as many of these as you can. Now we move on to the back row, starting with the original Temple of the Kings that we've been mentioning so much so far. You can activate 1 trap card the turn it was set. You can send 1 Mystical Beast of Serket in your main monster zone and discard you control to the graveyard. Special summon 1 monster from your hand or deck, or 1 fusion monster from your extra deck. You can only use each effect of Temple of the Kings once per turn. Yeah, as you can see, this card does not screw around, and it shouldn't come as a surprise, but this card did get errataed, as this is not the original effect it had. The first effect, to basically activate 1 trap card the turn it was set, was basically as Makiura's pre-errata effect before he got the same treatment before coming off its last time on the ban list. As while this card was on the field, you could infinitely keep activating trap cards the turn they were set, and let's just say it was just absolutely ridiculous to the kind of advantage you could generate with this card. And that was only the first effect. The second effect basically lets you summon anything, including certain fusion monsters from the extra deck, simply by sending this and the original Serket Scorpion into the graveyard. I must say it was not very consistent, and that effect, no matter how good it was, did not come up nearly as much as the first effect, which basically allowed you to get some insane advantage because early trap cards were just something else entirely. Nowadays this is completely obsoleted, as in no one ever runs this card unless you wanna do some experimenting with the original Serket Scorpion, since this deck is a bit more consistent at doing this nowadays than it was before, due to it not being an archetype at the time. But usually you would want to run its retrain instead, that being Treasures of the Kings. It's a field spell this time around, and when this card is activated you can set 1 Apophis trap from your deck. This card's name becomes Temple of the Kings while it is in the field zone. Once per turn, if you have 2 or more set cards on your field or a trap card in your graveyard, you can add 1 monster that mentions Temple of the Kings from your deck to your hand. You can only activate 1 Treasures of the Kings once per turn. At the cost of losing the effect to summon anything, basically up to fusion monsters in terms of the game's environment at the time, you basically get a way more searchable and way more consistent for in archetype use, I should say, archetypal card, and the definite centerpiece of your Temple of the King strategy, if I can call them that. definitely run 3 of them and never run any less. Next up we have Defense of the Temple, which is their archetypal fusion card to bring out the fusions. Fusion summon 1 Earth fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field. If you use a monster you control that mentions Temple of the Kings, you can also use face-up monsters your opponent controls as materials. If you control Temple of the Kings, you can banish this card from your graveyard, add 1 Dangers of the Divine from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect of Defense of the Temple once per turn. Non-quick play Super Poly. I never thought I'd see the day, but here we are, I guess. And yeah, it's in terms of like comparing to Super Poly, it doesn't even come close as this is. I mean, it's super locked into its archetype, and unless there are some super generic ways to use this coming in the near future, or some exist right now and that I'm not aware of them, this is the most by the numbers card so far that we've seen, and is a perfectly fine and playable card in said archetype and nothing too amazing. Again, you run 2 or 3 of these because the fusions are good, but not generically good, I should say. But yeah. Anyway, the card it just searches happens to be the last spell card we have today on the roster, that being the quick play spell Dangers of the Divine. Pay half your life points, then tribute 1 monster. Special summon 1 the Winged Dragon of Ra from your hand or banishment, ignoring its summoning conditions, and make its attack and defense 4000. But it cannot attack. Also during the end phase of the next turn, return it to the hand. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, choose 1 the Winged Dragon of Ra in your main monster zone and send all other monsters on the field to the graveyard, and you can only use each effect of Dangers of the Divine once per turn. Ugh, okay, so just like Thunder Speed summon in freaking Poker Nights, this thing has absolutely nothing to do with the playstyle of the archetype it was released, and I'm only looking at it because Defense of the Temple searches it. Nothing else is literally tying it to the archetype, nor the effect. I mean, yeah, it's clearly made to be a big stupid anime reference, and that's just about it. It does not support any legitimate playstyles that this new archetype has in store for itself, unless you really feel like cramming Winged Dragon of Ra into your deck, which will do you more harm than good, and if we're being honest, but at least this card sort of gives you the choice. Personally, I would really advise you to not run this and instead save your deck space for something a bit more proactive or for more hand traps if you're lacking some protection options. But yeah, this is just, yeah, ignore it if you want to make anything meaningful out of the deck, and let's just move on. At least Thunder Speed Summon happens to do something that supports the actual Poker Night playstyle, as this one doesn't. Really, it doesn't. Anyway, that was their last spell, like I said, and now we move on to the traps. The first one being Embodiment of Apophis. It's a continuous trap that says, during the main phase, special summon this card as a normal monster, which is a reptile type, earth level 4, 1600 attack and 1800 defense, and this card is still a trap. And yeah, that would be right, people. This was, I think, the very first monster trap ever made, and by god does it sure feel like it. Yeah, just don't bother with this one. A few years ago it got a retrain in the form of Apophis the Swamp Deity, also a continuous trap, also special summoned as a normal monster, this one being a reptile type earth level 6 with 2000 attack and 2200 defense. It's still treated as a traps for some stupid reason, and then you can negate the effects of all face-up cards your opponent currently controls up to the number of other continuous traps you control until the end of this turn. So yeah, this is the card I was referring to when I was talking about the Fusion Apophis. And yes, you do need to run these things in order to make Fusion Apophis, just to be clear. And yeah, out of all the Apophis trap cards, which there are 3 of them in total, and the third one is coming right after this one. This is clearly the best, as in combination with Fusion Apophis, you can basically make some a hell of a lot of removal in just a few actions, which is something that should not be scoffed at in any shape or form. So yeah, this is a definite 3 of staple, even with some of its crippling downsides that it has. The last Apophis trap card is Apophis the Serpent, another Apophis retrain, which also is special summoned as a normal monster, reptile type earth, with the same stats actually as the OG Apophis, I should say. It's still also treated as a trap card because we're stupid like that. Then you can set one Apophis trap from your deck except Apophis the Serpent. It can be activated this turn. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one embodiment of Apophis from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Apophis the Serpent once per turn. I mean, yeah, you probably shouldn't run the OG Apophis cards, but at least this card gives you a cute alternative into goading you to basically run it for the sake of, you know, utilizing your deck to the fullest. Well, yeah, most of the time you're going to be focusing on this and the Swamp Deity Apophis, so yeah, I would say run 3 Deity, 2 of these, and then maybe, I guess, 1 of the original if you really feel like it, so yeah, that should be your most optimal ratio. And the last 3 trap cards are part of the Anubis series, which we've been avoiding heavily since the main deck boss monster. The first one being the original counter trap, Judgment of Anubis. When your opponent activates a spell card that would destroy a spell or trap on the field, discard 1 card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. Then you can destroy 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, and if you do that, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the destroyed monster's attack on the field. Yeah, this one was kind of pretty good. I mean, for what it was. The activation condition was a bit specific. You only needing, only working with when an opponent activates a spell card which would destroy a back row piece. But the blowback you get was actually pretty decent if you would manage to pull it off, which again was not much of the time. I mean, Solemn Judgment was a much better card and still is compared to this. But I mean, being a part of this archetype gives it some levity, so for experimentation. I don't know how to speak sometimes, but anyway, yeah, I would say run 1 or 2 if you feel like it. Its next retrain wasn't much of a retrain, as it was a curse, aptly named Curse of Anubis, which allowed you to change all effect monsters on the field to defense position until the end of this turn. The original defense of those monsters becomes 0, and also their battle positions cannot be changed. It makes me, like, collectively shrivel and groan whenever I see a card that uses defense points manipulation as its main gimmick and locking you into defense position. I mean, listen, if you're not Quaking Mirror Force, then you're basically worthless to me. God damn it, stop ringing my bell already again. Sorry if you heard that, but anyway, Curse of Anubis was like relatively crappy back then, and it's even crappier now, so you never ever run it. The one you should be running is their newest and our last card for today, Verdict of Anubis. It's also a counter trap like Judgment of Anubis, and when your opponent activates a spell or trap card while you control 3 or more other spell or traps, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Then if you control Temple of the Kings, you can destroy as many monsters your opponent controls as possible. Then inflict to your opponent the damage equal to half the total original attack of those destroyed monsters, and you can only activate 1 Verdict of Anubis once per turn. Yeah, this one is an upgrade in every sense of the word. It even gives you a more generic activation condition. Again, it's not the most generic still in terms of its activation condition, but it's pretty up there. It requires working with Apophis cards in order to make the best use of it, but again, it does not specifically mention Apophis cards, so you can use... So you can maybe use this in a Phantom Knight deck if you really feel like it, since it actually no, you couldn't maybe use it because it requires you to control spell or traps, and since the Phantom Knights are superior beings and do not require are not still treated as spell or trap cards when they are face up in the monster zones and being treated as monsters, I guess you're stuck with this archetype. I mean, yeah, the card is still good, but again, you couldn't have just thrown us a little bit of a bone by making this playable in Phantom Knights. I mean, there are Phantom Knights trap cards that are still treated as trap cards when they are treated as monsters, and yeah, this is just a word smorgasbord that I'm just waiting to get tied up into, so I might as well end it here and move on to the grading. And move on to the grading I shall, as we are done with this archetype analysis. In terms of consistency, well, the only form of consistency boosting in terms of kickstarting your plays is the man with the mark, and other cards are not really relevant to bring up in this medal. I mean, Treasure of the Kings also does some searching in of itself. The Apophis traps also have some, like, I mean, the Apophis, the serpent, only searches the OG Apophis, so it's not, again, it's barely there. So yeah, this is not off to a good start, so that's a 1 out of 3 when it comes to consistency, as again, its only source is the man with the mark, and that's only a single level 4 monster. In terms of power, well, I am encouraged to give them a very generous 2 out of 3 in terms of the power, because both Serket retrains can hit exceptionally hard, and not to mention Anubis the Last Judge is fairly easy to summon, and Divine Serpent Apophis can also swing in for a decent hit every now and then. And yeah, I'll talk more about the Divine Serpent when I get to the versatility section. But now, as for the comeback ability, well, a well-timed verdict of Anubis and judgment of Anubis can catch the opponent off guard pretty quickly and enable you the first chance to get a comeback. But if you're behind on the whole resource thing and are losing heavily, not even those can save your ass from wipe. So yeah, that's a 1 out of 3 when it comes to comeback ability. Protection exists in a lot of their cards. It's fairly sparse, but the amount of protection and the variety of protection it offers is enough for me to be a bit generous here and give them a 2 out of 3 as well. And for the versatility, I'll also give them a 2 out of 3, simply because of the sheer versatility of the Divine Serpent Apophis and Apophis, the Swamp Deity combo, which allows for mass negation and mass popping whenever the two go off together. And yeah, Verdict of Anubis, not Verge of Anubis, is also a pretty ridiculous card and should not be underestimated, so that's a very deserved 2 out of 3 when it comes to the versatility aspect. Overall, for how long we've waited for these cards to get released, it's not that bad, but it definitely could have been a bit better. I mean, yeah, sure, one of the cards that does not even like support the main playstyle this archetype is supposed to have. It's just a shitty anime reference and nothing more. And I don't mind anime references in like card arts and effect integration, but that definitely shouldn't be done at the cost of killing the archetype's potential playability. I'm heavily against that. Cards like Morphtronic Earphone and Vision Resonator, that's how you do anime references. They're like perfect. Couldn't have asked for something better. Or Return of the Reaper in Infernities. That one is just it's just that good. But this, the Danger of the Divine, yeah, I almost forgot what the card was actually called. Don't do that, please. Anyway, yeah, next video, whenever that will be, it might be a bit sooner than you think, because the newest Archetype rematch volume is almost ready, as I'm still waiting for the final 8 cards to put into the compilation, and then we're good to go with that video. It's also my birthday in like 12 days, so we'll see if I'll do something special with that. I didn't have any sort of special plans, so we'll just have to wait and see what opportunities present themselves. But for now, thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more baseball news and updates. Have yourselves a great day, and I will see you all next time.